guys, it is Tiffany from the Stoke Fam again, and I am coming back to you with our second video in our homeschooling series. And today we are going to break down how to determine your homeschool style or method to help you then navigate and figure out what curriculum might be best for you. And again, I'm going to mention that if you go over to our website, which is thestokefam.com, that you can find a lot of these resources that I'm going to mention, because there's a lot of them today already on there. But if you otherwise, grab a pen and paper and get ready, because there's a lot of information about to come at you. Okay, so first off, I just want to say one of the biggest things that I feel is important that not a lot of people told me or talked about is that when you're choosing your curriculum, it's very important, I feel, to pick something that actually works for your learning style and your child's learning style, not what you think the school system would want you to do, not what you think someone else is doing, not what another mom is doing that looks really cool and you think it's really cool, but your kids would actually hate it and you know it. It's really easy to get grabbed in those directions because there are these ideals we have in our head. And I'm totally guilty of it. We've tried several things, and a lot of the times the reason that they didn't work was because I wasn't thinking about us. I was thinking about myself and how I would like to see things run, or I was thinking about how I see other families work instead of choosing us. And so that's my spiel at the beginning of this, that take all of this with that as in mind, that what your family needs, you know the most, more than anybody else does, what your family needs and what your family enjoys is, no one else can tell you that. That is totally up to you, and you're in control. Once you've turned in that notice to homeschool, you are now in control and you get to make the choice. The only exception to that is if you are actually doing an online virtual academy that's still public school, or a virtual option that's still technically public school, and then you don't have as much choice. But I just wanted to mention that because it's something that I didn't take into account as much as I should have when we were first starting. And so we could have done better with a few things early on. I'm going to kind of get into next the most common homeschool styles. Now, that said, even within these styles, there are still like derivatives within a lot of them. So this is a very overview, but it hopefully will help you to figure out and be like, oh, that sounds like the most like us, to help you figure out then where to go next. So first off, I'm going to talk about the Charlotte Mason homeschool style, which we actually did to a T for 2 years and loved it. It was beautiful. The idea of a Charlotte Mason based homeschool approach is that it emphasizes living books and the teaching of the student as a born person and a whole being. And basically the idea is that you don't water down info for them. You teach them the difficult stuff early. So our kids were introduced to things like Shakespeare and would have been being introduced to people like Plutarch in this year if we were still in that full method. The other piece of the Charlotte Mason lesson is it emphasizes, especially in the early ages, short lessons, because as we know, that kids' attention spans they don't last forever. So getting a kid to sit down and do math for an hour and a half, probably not going to happen. At least not at the early elementary age. And so the emphasis is on short lessons that are and a wide variety of subjects to really give them a great view of what the world is about and to help them really have a good overview of everything. And I loved this. She also was really big on time in nature and nature study, which is totally up our alley, as you might know. And so that really spoke to me. The problem for us was that doing it to a T in the true purist Charlotte Mason style, remember how I said there were subdivisions, there's purist and imperfect and inspired and all of that, but in a purist Charlotte Mason form, it just was so time consuming. And it was beautiful, but I did not have the time. That's really what it boiled down to. And it doesn't mean, if you don't have the time for a curriculum, it doesn't mean that you're not willing to do what you need to do for your children's education. It just means that that particular style, that particular ideal may not be the best fit for you. And it took me a little bit to get there, but I still love the concepts and I still try to incorporate them, but it is not my end all be all, and I am not a purist, we'll just say that. However, if that sounds like you, if you're like, oh, I have plenty of time and we love nature and I love that concept of kids being born persons and teaching the whole person and that whole holistic style, then this might be for you. Some resources that I would recommend for those for the Charlotte Mason style is Ambleside Online, A Delectable Education, Simply Charlotte Mason, and the Wildwood Curriculum, which is actually a secular approach to Charlotte Mason. The next style of homeschooling I want to talk about is traditional school at home, or traditional or school at home. And this is basically what a lot of people think of when they think of homeschool. So they think of like a home classroom. Basically, it could be at the kitchen table, or it could actually have its own room. In fact, we did this. We tried this. We totally failed at it. Basically, we never ended up actually in the classroom. When we did, it felt too rigid, and it just didn't fit us. Doesn't mean it won't fit you. If your kids work great with that, then do it. But I'm just kind of sharing what has worked for us and what didn't, and what they're about, so that you can kind of decide. So often school at home or traditional schooling and homeschooling is done more so with textbooks, but it can be done virtually as well. And it would be similar to like textbooks that you would get in a traditional school setting. So that's why it's called like the traditional homeschool style. If you want to stick more towards like what your kids are used to in school, you might want to check out resources like Timberdoodle or Abeka. And then the next one I want to mention is classical. So classical approach is one that's been around since ancient times, like it's been here forever. And so the idea is that students move through 3 stages of study. The grammar phase, where they focus on memorization and facts in the early elementary years, and then the dialectic or logic phase, where they start to put logic and understanding to those facts that they've memorized. And then the 3rd stage is the rhetoric stage, where they actually get into more deep abstract thinking, and they can begin to put all of those things that they know in and articulate them and put them together well. One of the most popular ways for classical approach to be put into practice is classical conversations. And actually, I have some friends who use that and have done it for several years and absolutely love it. And it's really great because it does have a community aspect, which I'm not sure, to be honest, how that's working at this current time. My guess is some of that's gone virtual, but I'm not sure. Another resource for classical schooling, if that sounds more up your alley, if you like that kind of staged approach, is Veritas Press. That's another option I would recommend. And then the next style of homeschooling is unit study. And you've probably heard of the unit study term, and basically the idea is that you can learn multiple subjects around a particular topic or theme in one lesson per se. So for instance, you might do a study of the human body, and you might learn the science behind how the human body works. You might learn some of the chemistry aspects of what goes on within your body. You might learn the history of modern medicine. Basically, you're just going to take each section and go in depth. So the idea is that you pick a unit and you come at it from a wide perspective, and you focus deep on one particular topic or theme for a short amount of time, usually roughly a month. Unit studies also often have a lot of hands-on approach. Sometimes they'll utilize things like lab books, research, and much more. In fact, the core curriculum we use now is largely based on unit studies, which we'll talk about a little bit more later, but it's called Gather Round Homeschool, and it's largely based on that. Unit Studies by Amanda Beckett has a huge library of options. So really, I mean, if you want holidays, if you want to go to a unit study on a holiday, if you want to go to a unit study on current events, there's a plethora of stuff on her website. It is incredible how much is out there. And then 5 in a Row is another one we haven't actually personally used, but it has, we have several families who have used it, and it's also another unit-based approach. The next kind of schooling that I want to talk about is unschooling. And so I am not an unschooler, so I probably will botch this, because if you ask every homeschooler their definition of unschooling, they're probably going to give you a different definition. And that's because it looks so different for every single family. And unschooling does not mean that you're not teaching your kids or encouraging them to learn and just letting them do whatever they want. That is kind of a misconception, but it is based upon a child-led perspective and the idea that our kids want to learn, and that if we let them lead their learning, they're more engaged and receptive and capable of leading their own education. And it kind of creates a partnership between the parent and the kid, so that you're actually more of a facilitator and create an environment for learning for them. My guess is, based upon what I know about it, that it would probably be more difficult because your kid's like, hey, I want to learn this, and then you have to go figure out how to teach them that, even if you don't know it. It can be very rewarding because it can develop really deep discussions, and it really can inspire your kids to learn what they want to learn. So again, I am not a resource on unschooling because we don't do that, but it could be an option for some of you. So I wanted to mention that. I can't really give you a specific curriculum recommendation on that because obviously that is not really what unschooling is about, but there are some great resources. If you do any Googling, you can find some great resources of unschoolers who can probably lead you to some ideas to kind of get you started if that sounds like something that would work for you. Next up is an online virtual school, which typically is in relation to something like K-12 or Florida Virtual Academy, which is technically still a public school, but there are a few other online virtual schools that are not public schools. This may be an option that some of you guys are actually going to. But if you are enrolled with a public school through K-12 or something like that, you're technically not a homeschooler. Just so you know, you still have to follow the school's guidelines. If that sounds like something though that you would like to do is have an online virtual school where you don't have to do a whole lot of prep work, there's a few resources I wanted to throw at you. Basically, with online schooling, sometimes they're taught online by instructors. Sometimes it's more of a here's what you go through each day list. Sometimes it is a list with textbooks offline too. Sometimes it's a mix, so it can be a lot of things, but it's usually based online with an online tracking of some sort or an online resource of some sort to walk you through the whole curriculum. And some recommendations for that are Easy Peasy All-in-One Homeschool. That one is actually a free online homeschool. It is we used it, actually, I think it was for kindergarten, and it was great. I could not let my kindergartner run free on it, though, because he would click off on random other things. If you have an older kid, though, she does have it very listed by this is what you do on this day. You do this, 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 and this. And so that could be a really great option if you have an older child and you really need a budget-friendly option. And then the other options I mentioned are K-12 and Florida Virtual Academy. There's a bunch more. Those are just some of the ones that I'm aware of and have seen and or heard good things about. The next type of schooling that I am going to mention that I actually will totally say too, I don't know a whole lot about because it's not been our style, but it sounds really cool. We have some friends who do it. It's called the Montessori homeschool style, and it's more holistic. And in general, my understanding is that you set up learning centers, more unstructured learning time, and indirect instruction. So again, it's a little bit more child-led, but a little more staged, if you will, because you're setting up learning centers around what you want them to learn, but they learn it when they're ready and at their own pace. So resources for Montessori that I found are the Montessori concepts, which are actually tools and materials that you could use for a Montessori style of learning. And then Montessori with Lisa Nolan is a homeschool membership for kids ages 0 to 9. So it doesn't cover the older kids. I didn't find a whole lot that does in the older kids, but if somebody knows about that, I would love to hear about it. Let me know, and I'll add it to at least our website. But those are kind of what I found. And then last but not least, I wanted to mention Eclectic Homeschooling. And I think that's a little bit more what I identify ourselves as homeschoolers now, which is essentially where you use a mix of styles. You find what works for you and you go from there. So maybe you use a set math program every year, but you unschool every other subject. Totally fine. But that would be considered more eclectic because you're doing a mix of styles. Or you might do a living book-based approach like Charlotte Mason focuses on, but you might add in unit studies and a traditional math program. Again, for eclectic homeschoolers, there really is no set style, but you find what fits your family's needs in each area of study. As we have tweaked things over the years, this is what's really worked best for us. We could have bought a box curriculum and just had everything come, but it really wasn't our style. And so this way we've been able to mix things together, and it's really been helpful. And so we've actually narrowed things down to where our core curriculum is Gather Round by Rebecca Spooner from Homeschool On. And those are unit studies that are Charlotte Mason based. They're not strictly Charlotte Mason, but they are based in some of those concepts like living books and teaching the child as a whole person in a wide variety of subjects, which I really love. And then we also use a virtual math program, that's called Beast Academy. They do have a book version, but we really love the online version. Our kids log in each day and they can read the lesson for the day, which is in a comic book style. It goes up to, I think, 5th or 6th grade for Beast Academy, but then they have a second level that is called, I think, Art of Problem Solving. So it segues into that. But basically, they read a comic book style lesson with the beasts, and then they can watch an instructional video from an actual teacher, and then they practice it online. And it has made our math so much less stressful. And so that's what we're doing, is a mix of those. And then we also tend to let our kids choose some classes from one of our local homeschool co-ops, resource centers, whatever you want to call it. And so they typically choose a couple classes each term. And this year, those will be virtual, but they are available. And then we often do outdoor school, which I don't know that we're going to participate in this year. But that's kind of how we round things out. And then if I feel like there's something that they need a little extra on, which there is, we are actually going to add in a little bit of language arts, just because I know that's something we need a little extra work on, then we do so. But as it is with just Beast Academy and Gather Round, it is technically a full curriculum and really don't have to have anything else. But we do allow our kids to have a few electives, and then we add in things if we feel like they need a little extra work. But basically, if you have been listening, you can see there's no one-size-fits-all style, but hopefully hearing a little bit more about each style of homeschool will help you narrow down what works best for you and your family. Another resource for an eclectic style, other than Gather Round as unit studies and mixing and matching your other stuff, is actually Blossom and Root. And it looks very beautiful. It's not, we haven't used it, so I can't speak to it, but it looks beautiful. It is a secular nature-based program that has an inclusive history program as well, and it has roots based in Charlotte Mason and Waldorf style. So it's kind of a mix of a lot of different things, and so it looks like another great option. So I just wanted to mention that one as well. I hope that helps as you're narrowing down your curriculums. And if you have any questions about what we talked about, please feel free to reach out. I'm happy to talk things out with you, or if you're like, hey, how does this actually look? If you want to know if I've used a particular curriculum, I'm happy to let you know. I've tried a lot of things. We haven't done everything, but we've tried a lot of things, or we know someone who has if we haven't. So we're happy to help you out. So let us know, and I'll be back with more information in a day or so.